Our Ushabti melee version, any good in patch 5.2? The patch version is just a detail, but I'll say it plainly, I didn't understand them for the longest time. So I'm going to show them lots of love and treat them as the glue that makes everything else in the faction truly take off a status they have earned from me in the field. Recruited from even just the tier 2 version of the Ushabti building, something you can build in minor settlements, but is a bit pricey. Each unit comes in at 16 entities on Ultra, more than the Great Bow version. Per entity health is the same, but having 4 more pushes the unit health to 8,128. Armor is still 90, leadership is 50 rather than 40, speed 54, charge speed 78, these are identical. Melee attack begins at 23 as well, same attack interval of 3.8, splash target size of medium, so regular cavalry on down, and a maximum target damage by splash of 4, which is 1 more than the Great Bows. This means 16 units can theoretically aggrieve a total of 64 entities with actual damage, not just tossing them around like ragdolls. Up there with basic Croxagors for the Lizardmen. Melee defense starts at 35. Weapon strength is given as 79, not the 65 of the Great Bows, split between base 22 and armor piercing 57. Furthermore, there is a bonus versus infantry of 12, which instantly makes their starting melee attack into 35 against infantry. So against them, and only them, attack and defense are identical. Charge bonus is 18 and mass is 1500, same as the usual. Like the Great Bows, they are constructs, meaning necrotechs can boost them if nearby, and heal them. They cause fear, they hide in forest, and crumble when leadership collapses. In the Redline skills, Revered Stonemasonry at 3 pips adds plus 6 melee attack and plus 6 melee defense, and Ancient Stone grants rank 7 Ushabti, plus 5 leadership, plus 12% weapon strength, and 15% spell resistance to resist spell sniping, and so forth. Nonetheless, this means they remain more vulnerable to missile attack despite the armor. In the tech tree, Clothed in the Divine, in the 6th Dynasty, adds plus 5 melee attack, plus 5 melee defense, and plus 10% weapon strength. Any Tomb King with Geheb, the God of Earth, as a blessing grants plus 2 recruit rank to them, plus 5 melee attack and plus 5 melee defense. Lamizash of the 4th Dynasty would add plus 6 melee attack too, and yes, you can double these up. Herald of Djaf slaps Frenzy on all Ushabti in that army, and the Great Desert of Araby landmark at max level grants no less than perfect vigor to all Ushabti. So, yeah, that's a lot of buffs considering the somewhat humble beginnings. Yes, Zerkovich, you can raise them by a lot. So how do you use the Ushabti not summons? Well, just the fact that they're not going to eventually disintegrate on their own means you can use them in a variety of ways, and I truly do think of them as comparable to Croxagors in some respects. On top of what was covered, my will be done, adding plus 5 melee attack and plus 5 melee defense, 35 meters around a Tomb King. Even a bog standard rank 1 generic means that just hanging around the Tomb King, let alone with a Necrotech as well, is going to make an Ushabti unit hit more often, make enemies whiff more often, be even more armored, be resistant to ranged attacks, and maybe get a heal slipped in from the Necrotech as well. More to the point, that mass and the low mass of many of your frontline skeletons means they have a super easy time wading through the lines and hitting the enemy as reinforcing shock troops. Honestly, that charge bonus is pretty low anyway. Think of them as stay-and-fight monstrous infantry, but they're anti-infantry themselves, they're armor-piercing, as in, if they get buffed enough, then the armor-piercing will aggrieve large targets just fine, and being in the middle of friendly forces, be they Tomb Guard or low-end chaff, means they're a lot less likely to get mulched. I've seen a bunch last disturbingly well against Skarbrand, just from the fact they weren't infantry getting splashed. Also, the mass and size means they can't get collision damage pasted like Skarbrand does to infantry. These things matter when mammoths and chariots come calling. So again, passable against large, including as a counter-charging solution to problems. Consistent, wide area attacks against infantry, including armored infantry, and yes, I've gone over how Tomb Guard are exceptional against lower armored infantry, but not so much against the armored ones, and the Halberds versions would take an awful lot of buffing to be able to use their damage against stiff armored infantry effectively, though it is by no means impossible. So what does that tell us? What does that really say to us about the situation? It tells us Ushabti kill Dwarfs. I am not being particularly glib. One of the worst dilemmas as a Tomb King's player is how, and as importantly, when, to deal with dwarfs, especially Thoric Ironbrow. Yes, you have some cavalry options, but what truly mixes with your infantry and fights tooth and sickle against armored foes? What greatly adds to the striking power of infantry while naturally benefiting from infantry being around them in turn? What is such a natural target for ranged damage that missile tar pits around them is a natural and exceptional fit? Ushabti. There are other issues too. What's one of the biggest weaknesses of a Tomb Scorpion? Limited splash targets damage. They're powerful and disruptive, but all alone, they'll still drown against enemy numbers. A lot of the same goes for the Apex Predator constructs as well. A lot of us play on Ultra not just to test our PCs, but to keep the top dogs from completely obliterating stuff just by existing. But we still benefit from compensating for larger infantry blobs on the other side by having blob slasher units, and Ushabti plus an Apex Predator construct is a lot more effective than either one alone. So aside from catching more friendly arrows, less of a concern from skeleton archers but really hurting if it's great bows, or screaming skulls. You can mesh Ushabti with infantry, cavalry, lord, necrotex, tomb princes, single entity monsters constructs, and they'll add the target splash damage that chariot units lack for good measure. Isn't that like most of the roster? That's exactly right. I didn't appreciate enough how much this unit provides because it looks weak on paper, and I'd heard it makes for a Doom stackable option, or at least the Great Bows did. And don't get me wrong, the Great Bows are awesome, but they were designed to be markedly weaker in routine melee situations. In relative terms, the usual Ushabti are expendable, but they act like enforcers, keeping the rabble in check, while contributing to isolating and trapping the biggest threats. I haven't even started on the magical synergies. Incantation of Djaf Overcast as plus 16 versus large to each entity. Poof! Instantly. Only one unit at a time, still. The plus 25% melee damage is pretty radical too. The plus 40% damage resistance one can be good in a pinch when you want it protected against chaff that doesn't have magical attack. Aspect of the Dread Knight lets it cause terror and grants magical attack for the duration, and that can be overcast to cover a group. Even if the Ushabti themselves are heavily armor-piercing, the chaff they're helping probably aren't, so Soul Blight is a good use. Plus, Vortex spells, doing a fixed amount of damage per entity, aren't going to bother them much, so you can use them as tar pits in kind, and a Skull Storm has no inherent armor piercing, so it's shockingly safe to dump on top of an Ushabti tar pit anyway. But yeah, like I said, it's one of your most fundamental units for putting Dwarfs, Chaos Warriors, etc. in their place, and while it takes some of that buffing to do it efficiently, even blundering attacks that whiff a lot but hurt enough through armor when they hit and attack multiple entities are a good deal better than scimitars bouncing off Chaos Blessed plate. Even your worst case is a lot better than a Skeleton Warrior's best case. And 54 speed is still good enough to make some fun flanks with, or break through to the archer line through a battle line breach. Just remember that without the meatless meat shields, they're great targets for the enemy's ranged attacks. Take care, and have fun reaping a bloody harvest for the gods of the underworld, etc. He needs his jars.